Charlie Munger always had a peculiar way of viewing the world of finance. While most experts bombard people with complex formulas and fantastic strategies, he preferred the brutal simplicity of truth. Throughout his more than 100 years of life, Munger observed patterns that repeated themselves tirelessly. Intelligent, hard-working, and well-intentioned people who, even so, constantly felt behind in their financial journeys. And he realized that it wasn't lack of money that trapped them in this cycle, but rather seemingly harmless decisions that, added up over time, created a persistent feeling of always chasing their own financial tail. The first of these decisions, and perhaps the most insidious, is what Munger would call buying status instead of freedom. We live in an era where every achievement needs to be displayed, validated, and liked. People spend fortunes not necessarily because they need or desire a particular item, but because that item communicates something about who they are, or rather, about who they would like others to think they are. It's the car of the year when the current one works perfectly. It's the apartment at a specific address when they could live well elsewhere for half the price. It's the expensive restaurant dinner photographed for Instagram, when the truth is that the credit card bill is dangerously accumulating. Munger observed this with that mixture of disbelief and understanding that only decades of experience provide. He understood that we are social beings, that we constantly compare ourselves, but he also knew that this constant comparison is a deadly trap for personal finances. Every time you spend to impress, you're trading your future peace for present validation. And the worst part is that this validation is ephemeral, lasting seconds, while the cost extends for months or years through credit card installments. True status, in Munger's view, wasn't in appearing wealthy, but in having freedom of choice. Freedom to work at what you like, to spend time with those you love, to say no when necessary. This freedom only comes with financial security, and financial security rarely combines with spending designed to impress strangers. The second trap that Munger identified was what we can call unfounded financial optimism. It sounds contradictory coming from someone who spent decades investing and building wealth, but Munger made a clear distinction between optimism based on analysis and optimism that is just disguised magical thinking. How many times have you heard someone say they'll find a way to pay for something, or that they expect a bonus that hasn't been confirmed yet, or that they're counting on that opportunity that's almost certain? This type of optimism leads people to commit resources they don't yet have, based on future scenarios that exist only in their imaginations. Munger was brutal with this type of thinking because he saw repeatedly how this destroyed financial lives. The couple who buys the bigger house, counting on the promotion that hasn't come yet. The person who takes on more debt because next year I'll earn more. The entrepreneur who spends as if the next business is already a guaranteed success. They all operate under a dangerous premise that the future will certainly be better than the present. But Munger, who lived through wars, economic crises, and countless market turnarounds, knew that the future is, at best, uncertain. Planning as if everything will work out is a recipe for disaster. The sensible person, in his view, plans considering that things can go wrong, and when they go right, they simply find themselves in a more comfortable position than expected. The third decision that keeps people trapped in a cycle of financial delay is what Munger would call fleeing from discomfort through consumption. We have a complicated relationship with emotional discomfort. When we feel stressed, sad, anxious, or simply bored, we develop the habit of buying something to feel better. It's the expensive delivery after a difficult day at work. It's the online purchase at 3 in the morning when we can't sleep. It's the small rewards we constantly give ourselves because, after all, we work hard and deserve it. The problem isn't that you don't deserve good things, you do deserve them. The problem is using consumption as an emotional anesthetic. Munger perceived that the most financially successful people weren't necessarily those who earned more, but those who developed other ways of dealing with discomfort that didn't involve opening their wallet. They learned to sit with anxiety, to process sadness, to find free or cheap ways to celebrate and comfort themselves. Not that they lived in constant deprivation, far from it, but their spending came from conscious choices, not emotional impulses. And this distinction is absolutely crucial. When you spend on emotional impulse, you're always running behind, because negative emotions are constant in human life. There will always be stress, there will always be disappointment, there will always be boredom. If your automatic response to these states is to spend money, you'll be perpetually draining your resources without even realizing where the money went. The fourth trap, and one that Munger saw with increasing frequency in recent decades, is underestimating the power of compound interest working against you. Everyone knows the magic of compound interest when it comes to investments. Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world, but this same mathematical force that can build fortunes can also destroy them when it's working in the opposite direction. Every time you maintain a credit card balance, every time you finance something at high rates, every time you take loans without real necessity, you're putting compound interest to work against your interests. What Munger observed is that people rationalize these decisions with seemingly reasonable arguments. It's only 12 small installments. It's just until I get organized. The rate isn't that high, but the problem isn't a single debt or a single financing. It's the pattern. When you live with revolving debt as a normal part of life, you're constantly transferring a significant part of your future income to banks and financial institutions. You may be earning well, but a considerable portion of that earning is already committed before it even reaches your hands. This creates that persistent feeling of always being behind, because literally you're always paying for the past instead of building for the future. And the longer this cycle lasts, the harder it becomes to escape it, because the interest keeps accumulating, the debts grow, and you find yourself working more and more just to stay in the same place. The fifth problematic decision that Munger identified was failing to create protection buffers. A buffer is that margin of safety, that space for financial maneuvering that separates people who navigate crises with relative comfort from those who are devastated by any unforeseen event. Munger, who studied the history of great fortunes and also of great bankruptcies, perceived a clear pattern. Those who survived and prospered were those who always maintained reserves. No matter how well things were going, they never operated at the limit of their financial capacity. But most people do exactly the opposite. They stretch their budget to the maximum. They buy the most expensive house the bank approves. They take on the car with the highest installment they can pay. They live spending everything they earn, sometimes even a little more. And then, when the inevitable happens, illness, job loss, family emergency, unexpected repair, they enter total panic. They need to resort to emergency loans with absurd rates, or worse. They become delinquent and see their name tarnished and their financial life destroyed. And the cycle perpetuates itself because now, in addition to not having a buffer, they're also dealing with the consequences of the previous crisis. Munger was almost obsessive about this. He frequently spoke about the importance of operating with a margin of safety in everything, in investments, in personal finances, in business. It wasn't pessimism, it was realism. Things go wrong. Life is unpredictable. The job that seemed secure disappears. The health that seemed robust fails. The car that seemed perfect breaks down. People who don't prepare for these realities aren't being optimistic, they're being naive. And they pay a high price for this naivety, constantly feeling behind because they're always putting out fires instead of building for the future. The sixth and final decision that keeps people trapped in the cycle of financial delay is what we can call failing to invest in financial learning. Munger was a voracious devourer of knowledge. He read constantly, studied, sought to understand how things worked, and he applied this same approach to finances. But he noticed that most people treat their personal finances as something that happens to them, not something they actively manage. They don't understand how interest works. They don't know how to calculate the real cost of an installment purchase. They don't comprehend basic concepts like inflation or investments. And worse, they don't see a problem with this. There's a curious reluctance to admit financial ignorance. The same people who would calmly say, "I know nothing about medicine," or "I don't understand physics," become uncomfortable admitting they don't understand their own finances. And this reluctance to admit ignorance leads to reluctance to seek knowledge. So they continue making important financial decisions based on flawed intuitions, advice from equally uninformed friends, or worse still, on promises from salespeople who have their own interests in mind. They buy unnecessary insurance because someone convinced them they needed it. They make bad investments because they seemed promising. They miss opportunities because they didn't know they existed. Munger always emphasized that it's not necessary to be a genius to have financial success. The math involved is basic. The principles are simple, but you need to invest time in learning. You need to read, study, understand, and especially you need to apply what you learn. There's no use reading about the importance of saving if you don't save. There's no use understanding compound interest if you continue accumulating debts. Knowledge only has value when it transforms into action. What made Munger's observations particularly powerful was that he didn't come from a place of judgment, but from genuine curiosity about human behavior. He recognized that we are creatures of habit, influenced by cognitive biases, subject to social pressures, limited by our education and context. But he also firmly believed that we have the capacity to change. It's not easy, it's not fast, but it's possible. The person who constantly feels financially behind can change their trajectory, but they must first recognize the patterns that keep them trapped. And perhaps Munger's deepest insight about all these destructive behaviors was this: they are interconnected. A person who buys status probably also uses consumption to deal with emotions. Those who have unfounded financial optimism probably don't invest time in financial education. Those who don't create buffers probably also underestimate the power of compound interest working against them. These aren't isolated errors, they're systems of behavior that mutually reinforce each other, and that's why changing is so challenging. You're not changing one decision, you're changing a way of operating in the world. But here's the good news that Munger also emphasized. Just as these negative behaviors mutually reinforce each other, positive behaviors do too. When you stop buying status and direct that money toward investments, you begin to see compound interest working in your favor, which motivates you to learn more, which leads you to create better buffers, which reduces your stress and decreases emotional consumption. Creating real change requires breaking the negative cycle and starting a positive one. The first step is always the hardest, but each subsequent step becomes a little easier because you begin to see results. The feeling of always being financially behind isn't about how much you earn. Munger knew rich people who felt broke and people of modest income who felt prosperous. The difference was in daily decisions, in established habits, in the fundamental relationship with money. It was in understanding that personal finances are, in the end, personal. There's no magic formula that works for everyone. But there are universal principles. Spend less than you earn. Avoid expensive debts. Create reserves. Invest for the long term. Learn constantly and make decisions based on real values, not on external validation. Munger lived an extraordinarily long and prosperous life, not because he avoided all mistakes. He made many, but because he learned from them. And more importantly, because he developed systems of thinking that helped him avoid repeated errors. He viewed personal finances through the same lens. He viewed investments as a long-term game where consistency matters more than genius, where avoiding big mistakes is more valuable than hitting big bets. and where patience compounded over decades produces results that seem magical, but are just basic math applied disciplinedly. If you identify with that feeling of always running behind financially, you're not alone. It's an experience shared by millions of people, many of them earning much more than you imagine. The question isn't how much comes in, but what you do with what comes in. And the good news, the one that Munger would certainly like you to internalize, is that you have control over these decisions. You can start today. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do everything at once, but you need to start. Each small decision in the right direction is a brick in the construction of your future financial freedom. And decades later, you'll look back and realize that that feeling of always being behind has transformed into something completely different. The tranquility of being exactly where you plan to be.